The Pilbara stretched endless in ochre and black under a moonless sky. 300 meters from a deserted mining track, Sergeant Maddie Brennan pressed her body flat against iron-rich rock, still radiating the day's brutal heat. Beside her, Thor, 35 kilos of Belgian Malinois muscle and instinct, remained perfectly still, ears forward, nose testing the night air. Something was wrong. Maddie had learned to trust that feeling years ago, the same way her father had taught her to trust the weight of a rifle, the pull of a trigger, the mathematics of wind and distance. Warrant Officer Donovan, Eagle Eye, Brennan had been dead 3 years now. But his voice still lived in her head during moments like these. When the hair on your neck stands up, little hawk, you listen, your body knows things your brain hasn't figured out yet. Thor's ears twitched once, twice, then pinned back against his skull. Contact. Maddie keyed her radio, her voice barely a whisper. Sunray, this is Brennan. Thor's alerting, something's not right with this picture. Warrant Officer Jacko, Ghost, Patterson's voice crackled back, dry as the desert around them. Define, not right. Sergeant, we're supposed to be checking for some dodgy miners running unregistered gold. Not re-fighting the Timor conflict. Sir, Thor doesn't alert on civilians. Whatever's down there. The night exploded. Muzzle flashes erupted from 4 positions, simultaneously converging on a small depression 200 meters ahead. Maddie's night vision flared green-white with the sudden illumination. Through the bloom, she caught fragmentary images. A man diving for cover. Something small clutched against his chest. A child, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, blonde hair wild in the chaos. 4 shooters, professional spacing, suppressed weapons. She could tell from the sound signature, that distinctive snap hiss instead of the full-throated crack of unsuppressed fire. These weren't local coppers. These weren't even AFP. These were contractors, private military, the kind of men who asked questions never and buried answers deep. The man in the depression returned fire. One-handed, awkward, his other arm wrapped around the little girl, shielding her body with his own. Maddie's trained eye catalogued details in microseconds, proper stance despite the impossible angle. Controlled bursts instead of spray and pray. Tactical reload smooth even under pressure. Former military, commando, maybe, or SASR. And he was about to die. Ghost, we have contact. 4 armed hostiles engaging what looks like a civilian with a child. Request permission to. Negative. Brennan, we are observers only. This is not our mission. We call it in. And Maddie was already moving. 30 years in the Australian Army had taught Jacko Patterson many things. One of them was recognizing when an order would be ignored. He heard it in the sudden silence on the radio. Saw it in the blur of movement through his rifle scope as Maddie Brennan did exactly what her father would have done. What he himself would have done 30 years ago. Damn the girl, damn her and her father both for teaching him that sometimes the book was wrong. Brennan, if you're going to be stupid, at least be smart about it, he muttered, knowing she couldn't hear him now. He was already adjusting his position. The Barrett M82 tracking toward the nearest hostile. Cowboy rules, just like Timor. Maddie moved through the darkness like water. Thor a shadow at her heel. The K9 had gone into work mode. No sound, no visible presence. Just lethal potential compressed into fur and fangs. They'd trained together for 6 years, longer than most marriages, and the bond between them went deeper than commands or rewards. Thor understood violence the way Maddie understood ballistics, professionally, personally, completely. She closed the distance, 70 meters, 60, 50, the suppressed Sig Sauer P320 came up smooth. An extension of her arm rather than a separate object. Her father's voice again, from 1,000 practice sessions in the scrubland at WA. Small woman, big gun doesn't work. Small woman, perfect fundamentals beats a big bloke every time. First hostile in her sight picture. 40 meters, crouched behind a saltbush, rifle up, firing at the man and child in controlled 3-round bursts. Professional, disciplined. Maddie's breathing slowed, heartbeat steady. The SASR combat mindset settled over her thoughts like armor. Everything sharp, everything clear, everything reduced to geometry and physics and will. The Sig coughed twice, suppressed but not silent, discreet violence. The hostile's head snapped back. He dropped without a sound, without ceremony, without anything except the simple transition from living to not. The second hostile, alerted by his partner's fall, started to turn. Thor didn't need a command. 6 years of partnership meant the K9 moved when Maddie moved. Attacked what Maddie attacked, understood intent before words formed. The Malinois launched from the shadow like a missile. 35 kilos of evolved predator hitting the hostile at the back of his knees. The man went down hard, his rifle clattering away. Thor's jaws found his arm. Not killing, not yet, just controlling, holding, waiting for Maddie to close the distance and make the final decision. She did. One shot. Clinical. Necessary. The third hostile finally processed that the hunter had become the hunted. He pivoted, rifle coming up, searching for targets he couldn't quite see in the darkness. His night vision had been focused on the man and child. Pupils constricted. Now he was blind, panicking, firing wild bursts into empty night. Maddie moved laterally, off his line of fire. Her father's voice, never be where they expect you. The best position is always the one they don't understand. Her SIG found him at 30 meters. 2 rounds. Center mass. He folded. The fourth hostile was smarter. He'd gone prone the moment his team started dying. Making himself small, making himself hard. Now he was crawling backward. Trying to break contact. Trying to fade into darkness and distance. A voice cracked across the night. Old but steady, riding the wind from 300 meters away. Brennan, 4th Tango at your 3 o'clock. 200 meters. He's yours. Ghost, watching through his scope, reading the battlefield like a book written in blood and shadow. Maddie's M4A1 carbine came off her back, settling into the pocket of her shoulder like coming home. The optic found him, just a dark shape against darker ground. Barely visible even with magnification. Moving away, smart, almost smart enough. On target, she whispered, wind left to right, 4 knots, temperature, 38 degrees. You're shooting downhill, remember your ballistics. Her father had taught her to shoot. Ghost was teaching her to be deadly. The M4 fired once. The shape stopped moving. Silence reclaimed the desert, that peculiar stillness that follows violence. Like the world itself holding its breath, deciding whether to keep turning or grind to a halt. Maddie moved forward, Thor at heel, weapon up, checking corners that didn't exist in the open desert because the rules were the rules and the rules kept you alive. She found the man still crouched in the depression, still wrapped around the little girl. Blood dark on his shoulder. His pistol tracked her movement. Finger on the trigger. Ready. Easy, Maddie said, voice low. I'm Australian Army. You're safe now. Nobody's safe. His voice carried the rasp of pain and exhaustion. If you're here, they know where I am. If they know where I am, more are coming. Then we move. What's your name? Liam Sullivan. This is Sophie. He shifted, revealing the child properly. 6 years old, blonde, blue-eyed, terrified but silent. Trained not to cry, not to scream. That broke Maddie's heart more than the blood or the bodies or the violence. No 6-year-old should know how to be silent while men with guns tried to murder her father. Liam Sullivan, former commando, got out 6 years ago. Maddie wasn't asking. The way he moved, the way he'd fought, the way he held his weapon, told the story. What did you do to make Outback Resources Group send a kill team after you? His eyes widened. How did you? Those weren't government contractors. Wrong weapons, wrong tactics, wrong everything. Org runs the nastiest private security in the country. So, I'll ask again, what did you do? I found something. His hand moved to a pocket. Came out with a USB stick. Small, innocuous, the kind of object that looked like nothing and contained everything. Files, recordings, evidence of treason going back 27 years. And they killed my wife 18 months ago for finding the start of it. Sophie whimpered, the first sound she'd made. Liam's arm tightened around her. They told me it was a home invasion. Random, wrong place, wrong time. But Nora wasn't random. She was an accountant at org. She found discrepancies in the books. Started asking questions. His voice went hollow. 2 weeks later, men came to our house. Made it look like a robbery gone wrong. Took her jewelry, but left her laptop. Professional, clean. Thor moved close to Sophie. Pressed his shoulder against her leg. The child's small hand found his fur. Buried fingers deep. Some tension left her body. Sophie doesn't know. Liam continued. Quieter now. She thinks her mother died in a car accident. I couldn't tell her. How do you tell a 6-year-old that her mother was murdered for discovering a conspiracy? You don't, Maddie said. You keep her alive. Everything else is secondary. Ghost's voice on the radio. Brennan, we need to move now. I'm seeing heat signatures on thermal. Multiple vehicles approaching from the north. 2 minutes out, maybe less. Maddie made the decision in a heartbeat. The wrong decision according to regulations. The right decision according to every moral code her father had ever taught her. Can you walk? Liam nodded, teeth gritted against the pain. Then we run. Ghost, I'm bringing them in. Brennan, that's not protocol. We don't have authorization to. Sir, with respect, protocol says we watch a 6-year-old die. I'm not doing that. You want to court-martial me? File the paperwork tomorrow. Right now. I need extraction and I need it fast. Silence on the radio, long enough that Maddie thought she'd pushed too far, crossed too many lines, burned too many bridges. Then, Roger that, Sergeant, bringing the truck around, you've got 90 seconds to make the rally point. A pause. And Brennan? Sir? Your old man would have done the same damn thing. They ran. Liam moved well despite the shoulder wound. A soldier's discipline overriding pain. Sophie stayed silent, clutched against his chest. Maddie took point. Thor ranging ahead, nose and ears doing what human senses couldn't. Reading the wind for threats. Finding the path of least resistance through spinifex and stone. Behind them, vehicles roared closer. Spotlights carved the darkness into pieces. Hunting, seeking, desperate to find what they'd lost. Ghost's truck materialized from shadow. A battered Ford F-250 that looked like every other station vehicle in the Pilbara and concealed enough weapons to start a small war. The rear door flew open. In, now. They piled into the cab. Liam and Sophie in the back. Maddie in the front passenger seat. Thor in the narrow space between seats. Ghost already had the truck moving before the doors were closed. No lights, driving by moonlight and memory through terrain that would kill most men trying the same. They're going to follow us, Liam said, looking back through the rear window. Let 'em try. Ghost's voice carried 40 years of confidence. I've been running extraction routes through this country since before you were born. Son, they want to find us. They're going to have to get a whole lot better at their job. The truck rocketed through the darkness. Engine screaming, tires finding purchase on ground that looked impossible. Behind them, spotlights swept and hunted and found nothing. Ghost knew every wash, every gully, every dead end and double back in 200 square kilometers. He'd learned it during the Indonesian confrontation, teaching young SASR blokes how to go walkabout and not get found. 20 minutes later, the spotlights faded behind them. 30 minutes and they were ghosts themselves. Invisible, untraceable, gone. Maddie finally holstered her cig. Let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She looked back at Sophie, still silent in her father's arms. Small hands still buried in Thor's fur. You okay, sweetie? Sophie nodded, didn't speak, just nodded and held on tighter to the dog who'd somehow become her anchor in a world gone insane. Good girl, you're very brave. My daddy says soldiers have to be brave. First words she'd spoken, a small voice, enormous courage. Are you a soldier? I am, and so is Thor, and we're going to keep you and your daddy safe. I promise. Sophie studied her face, a child's eyes seeing things adults missed. Okay, I believe you. Ghost drove in silence for another hour, working deeper into the scrub, following tracks that weren't tracks and paths that existed only in his memory. Finally, as false dawn started painting the eastern sky, he turned onto what looked like empty red dirt and stopped. We're here. Here was nowhere, a flat expanse of desert that looked exactly like every other flat expanse they'd crossed. Ghost climbed out, walked 20 meters, knelt, his hands found something in the sand. A recessed handle, invisible until you knew where to look. He pulled, muscles straining, and a section of ground lifted. A hatch, concealed, camouflaged, perfect. Below it, stairs descended into darkness. Old survey cache, Ghost said, his voice matter of fact. Built in the 80s when the brass thought we might have to fight a war on our own soil. Forgotten about when everyone decided we'd won forever. He smiled, thin and humorless. I didn't forget. Some of us knew, forever was a lie. They descended into the cache. Battery-powered lights flickered on, revealing a space larger than it should be. Reinforced concrete, climate-controlled, stocked with supplies that should have expired decades ago but hadn't, because Ghost had maintained them like some men maintain gardens. Weapons racked along one wall, food and water along another, medical supplies, communications equipment, everything needed to disappear and stay disappeared. We're safe here? Liam asked. Safe as anywhere. Ghost was already pulling a medical kit from storage. Let's look at that shoulder. While Ghost worked on Liam's wound, Maddie settled Sophie on a cot. Thor lying beside her. The child's eyes were drooping, adrenaline finally fading, exhaustion claiming what fear had held at bay. Sleep, Sophie, you're safe here. Promise? I promise, and soldiers don't break promises. Sophie's eyes closed. Within minutes, her breathing deepened, sleep took her, and with it the terrible weight of being 6 years old and hunted by men with guns. Maddie moved to where Ghost was finishing Liam's bandage. Through wound, clean, painful, but not fatal. Lucky. Talk, she said quietly. Everything. Start with why Org wants you dead bad enough to send a kill team. Liam looked at Sophie, sleeping, safe for now. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man who'd held secrets too long. I worked IT security for Outback Resources Group. Cybersecurity, specifically, monitoring networks, checking for intrusions, keeping the classified material actually classified. He paused. 3 months ago, I was doing routine maintenance on one of our secure servers. Found a hidden partition, encrypted, air-gapped, isolated from everything else. Shouldn't have existed. But you're good at your job, Ghost said, so you found it anyway. I'm very good at my job. Took me 6 weeks, but I cracked the encryption. Inside, he pulled out the USB stick again, held it up to the light like it contained all the world's sins. Compressed to digital format, inside was everything, 27 years of treason, documented in excruciating detail. What kind of treason? Maddie asked. The worst kind, the kind that doesn't look like treason at first. Liam's jaw tightened. After the Cold War, a lot of covert operators found themselves obsolete. Men who'd spent decades running black ops in hostile territory. Men who'd done things that never officially happened. When those operations got shut down, those men got nothing, no recognition, no proper benefits, no acknowledgement that they'd even existed. Ghost's face had gone carefully neutral. Too neutral, the kind of neutral that meant the words were landing close to home. Some of them got bitter. Liam continued, started selling what they knew. Intelligence from old operations, technology from decommissioned programs, names of assets still active in hostile countries. Small stuff at first, easy to justify as just compensation for services rendered that nobody in Canberra wanted to admit had happened. But it didn't stay small, Maddie said. It never does. By 2010, they'd graduated to active military technology, encrypted communication systems, drone software, weapons specs, and OUTBACK Resources Group was the middleman, making it all look legitimate. Defense contracts, research partnerships, international sales, all above board, all legal, all completely treasonous. How much money are we talking about? Ghost's voice had gone flat. $220 million over the last 6 years alone. And that's just what I could find in 3 months. The actual number is probably double that. Ghost stood, walked to the far wall, stared at weapons from a war that ended before Maddie was born. When he spoke, his voice carried a terrible understanding. Names? You have names in those files. Dozens of them, retired officers, active contractors, 2 serving major generals. And Liam stopped, looked at Maddie directly. Your father is mentioned in those files. Sergeant Brennan. The world stopped. What? Warrant Officer Donovan Brennan, listed as investigating unauthorized technology transfers. Last entry dated August 2022, 2 weeks before his death in Afghanistan. Maddie's hands had become fists. Knuckles white, breath coming short and hard. They killed him. His training accident wasn't an accident. Liam's voice was gentle now, understanding that he'd just destroyed her world. The files contain a voice recording. Major General Richard Hawthorne giving the order. And the voice confirming execution is, he hesitated. Say it. Declan Vance, former SASR, now an independent contractor for OUTBACK Resources Group. Ghost turned from the wall, his face carved from stone. Rick Hawthorne. Jesus Christ, Rick Hawthorne. You know him? Maddie asked. Know him? I served with him for 15 years. East Timor in '99. We ran patrols together. Iraq in '03. We ran interdiction ops behind enemy lines. Afghanistan, we covered the extraction when everything went sideways. Ghost's voice cracked, just slightly, just enough. He was my friend, my brother. I was best man at his wedding. And Declan Vance. Maddie's voice had gone cold as death. Did you know him? Your father trained him, Ghost said quietly. 2008 sniper school. Vance washed out, couldn't pass the psychological evaluation. Your father said Vance had all the talent in the world but no discipline. A killer's instinct without a conscience. Those were Donovan's exact words. And now he's murdered my father. And now, Ghost agreed, he's coming for us, because Liam has evidence that could burn down the entire operation, expose everyone involved, and send them all to a maximum security prison for the rest of their lives. Silence filled the cache, the kind of silence that comes before decisions that can't be undone. Sophie stirred in her sleep, made a small sound. Thor shifted closer, protective. Maddie looked at the child, sleeping and innocent and hunted by men who'd murdered her mother and would murder her father and her too. If given half a chance. Looked at the USB stick containing proof of conspiracy and treason. Looked at Ghost, old and tired and still dangerous because some skills never fade. We can't run forever, she said. No, Ghost agreed, we can't. They have resources, money, people, political protection. Yes, we're 4 people, a dog, and a USB stick full of evidence that half the government will want to bury. That's about the size of it. Maddie smiled. No humor in it, no warmth, just the terrible mathematics of violence and justice colliding in the dark. Then we don't run, we hunt 'em instead. Ghost studied her face, seeing her father's eyes, her father's determination, her father's absolute refusal to let evil win just because evil had better odds. Your father said something to me once. He said quietly, the night before we went into Timor. We knew we were going into hell, knew some of us weren't coming back. I asked him if he was scared. What did he say? He said, fear is the price of having something worth protecting. And if I'm going to pay that price, I'm damn well going to make sure the payment is worth it. Ghost's hand found her shoulder. You're paying that price now, Maddie, for Sophie, for Liam, for your father's memory, so make it worth it. I intend to. Then we need help, the kind of help that doesn't come from official channels. He pulled out an old flip phone. Actual buttons, no smart anything, impossible to trace or hack. I'm making some calls, calling in debts older than you are. People who remember when honor meant something and treason meant consequences. How long? 48 hours, maybe less, if I promise them something worth coming out of retirement for. He looked at the USB stick in Liam's hand. And I'd say exposing the people who turned Australian military service into a fire sale qualifies as worth it. Maddie nodded, looked at Sophie again, sleeping peaceful now, Thor a warm presence against her side. 48 hours, she agreed, then we go to war. Outside, dawn broke over the Pilbara, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Inside the cache, 4 people and a dog prepared for a fight that should never have been necessary. But as Donovan Brennan had taught his daughter 20 years ago during long afternoons in the WA scrub, learning to shoot and think and survive. The world doesn't give you the fights you want, little hawk, it gives you the fights you need. Your job is to win them anyway. Maddie Brennan intended to win, whatever the cost. 48 hours became 46 before Ghost's phone rang. Maddie was cleaning her cig when the sound cut through the cache's silence, a tiny electronic chirp from a device that belonged to a different era. Ghost answered without preamble, listened for 30 seconds, then simply said, understood, 2 hours. He closed the phone with a snap that sounded like a full stop at the end of a sentence. They're coming, he said, 2 of them, old friends, the kind you want in a fight and nowhere else. Can we trust them? Maddie asked. Ghost's smile carried decades of shared violence. With everything except money, women, and good judgment, but for this, absolutely. The first one arrived 90 minutes later. Maddie heard him before she saw him. The rumble of a diesel engine that sounded like it had crossed half the country without stopping. The hatch opened and boots descended. Heavy and deliberate, Senior Chief Davo McLeod filled the narrow stairway like water fills a glass. 6'2", barrel-chested, grey hair cropped military short despite being retired for 12 years. His face carried the roadmap of every hard place the army had ever sent him, scar tissue around the eyes. A broken nose reset imperfectly. A jaw that looked like it had been arguing with the world and winning since 1964. He saw Ghost and his face split into a grin that belonged on a man half his age. You old bastard, told the missus I was goin' fishing. You don't fish, Ghost said. Yeah, I know, she knows, but it's what we tell ourselves so she doesn't have to know I'm doing something stupid. Davo's eyes found Maddie, assessed her in a single glance that measured everything from her stance to her weapon maintenance to the set of her jaw. This the Eagle Eyes girl? Sergeant Maddie Brennan, meet Senior Chief Davo McLeod. He's forgotten more about weapons than most people ever learn. Davo extended a hand. His grip was careful, strong enough to show respect, gentle enough to show he understood she didn't need to prove anything. Your father taught me urban warfare back in the day, he said, best tactical mind I ever served with. He saved my life twice in one day. I'm sorry he's gone. Thank you, Maddie said, then, because she needed to know. Ghost said you served in East Timor. 1999. I was 19 years old and dumber than a box of hammers. His grin faded, learned real fast that war doesn't care about your age or your politics or your certainty that you're on the right side. It just cares whether you can shoot straight and move fast. And you could. I'm still here, aren't I? The second arrival came 30 minutes later, where Davo announced himself with noise and presence. This one arrived like smoke, silent, barely visible, suddenly just there at the bottom of the stairs. Chief Petty Officer Simone Blackwood was 56 years old and looked like someone's grandmother. Right up until you saw her eyes. They were the color of a winter sea and twice as cold. 5'6", slender build, grey hair pulled back in a severe bun. She carried a laptop bag and nothing else. But Maddie had the distinct impression she was more dangerous than Davo and Ghost combined. Simone, Ghost said, It's been too long. Not long enough. I was enjoying retirement. Her voice carried a British accent softened by decades in Australia. Then you called and said, Cold War ghosts, and I couldn't very well ignore that. Could I? No, Ghost agreed, you couldn't. Simone's gaze swept the cache. Cataloguing, analyzing, NSA signals intelligence from 1982 to 1998. Now, private sector cybersecurity consultant. And before you ask, yes, I can break into anything electronic that's been built in the last 40 years. She looked at Liam. I assume you're the one who found the files. Liam Sullivan, former Army commando, current, former org security contractor, I suppose, given that they're trying to murder me. Show me what you have. For the next hour, Liam and Simone huddled over her laptop, diving into the USB stick's contents. The rest of them gave them space. Let him work. Maddie used the time to brief Davo on the situation, the ambush, the escape, the files, the conspiracy stretching back nearly 3 decades. Davo listened without interruption, his face growing harder with each revelation. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Rick Hawthorne, he finally said, never served with him personally, but I knew his reputation. East Timor, Iraq, Afghanistan, the man was everywhere the shooting was worst. Thought he was one of the good ones. He was, Ghost said quietly, once, but somewhere along the way, he decided being forgotten was worse than being wealthy. And Declan Vance? Never liked him, Davo said, but Donovan gave him every chance. Tried to help him understand that being in the SASR wasn't just about killing. It was about knowing when not to kill. Vance couldn't grasp that, saw every problem as a nail and himself as the hammer. Now is a hammer for hire, Maddie said, and he murdered my father. Davo's hand found her shoulder. Squeezed once, then we make sure he pays for it. The old-fashioned way. Simone's voice cut through the moment. You need to see this. They gathered around her laptop. The screen showed a complex network diagram. Nodes and connections spreading like a spider's web. Liam's files are extensive, Simone said, but they're also incomplete. He found the what and the who. I found the how and the where. Her fingers danced across the keyboard. Outback Resources Group has been the clearinghouse. But the actual transfer of technology happens through a subsidiary company called Apex Maritime Solutions. They run a legitimate shipping operation out of Port Hedland. Containers, cargo vessels, international trade. Let me guess, Ghost said, not all the cargo is legitimate. Most of it is. That's what makes it the perfect cover. 95% of their business is above board, iron ore, machinery, consumer goods, but that last 5%. She pulled up shipping manifests, highlighted entries, military communications equipment, encrypted radios, drone control systems, all listed as electronic components or telecommunications hardware. Technically true, technically legal, completely treasonous. Where's it going? Maddie asked. Officially, South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, all our allies, all perfectly legitimate destinations. Unofficially, Simone's smile was colder than her eyes. The containers get, accidentally, routed through third-party ports. Singapore, Dubai, Jakarta. From there, they disappear into the grey market. 6 months later, Australian military technology shows up in the hands of groups we're actively fighting. Can you prove it? I can now. Liam's files gave me the encryption keys. I've been inside ORG's systems for the last 40 minutes. They have terrible operational security for a defense contractor. She pulled up more files. Complete transaction records, shipping routes, bank transfers, voice recordings of Major General Hawthorne coordinating sales. And, she paused, a finger hovering over a file. Video evidence. Of what? Maddie's voice had gone quiet. Your father's death. Afghanistan, August 2022. A training exercise that wasn't. Helmet camera footage from Declan Vance's perspective. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. Maddie's hands had become fists again, nails cutting into her palms. Breath shallow. Show me. Maddie, Ghost said gently, you don't need to. Show me. Simone looked at Ghost. He nodded once. She clicked the file. The video was short, 3 minutes of grainy footage showing an Afghan mountain range. A training course, her father moving through it with the fluid grace of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. Then Vance's voice, cold and professional. Target acquired. Orders confirmed. Execute. The camera shifted. Her father turned, saw Vance, understood in the last second what was happening. His mouth formed words. The audio was bad, but Maddie could read lips. Had learned from her mother, who was deaf in one ear and taught her daughter the skill as a game. Her father's last words, tell Maddie, tell her I'm proud of her. Then the shot, clean, Professional. Murder dressed as an accident. The video ended. Maddie stood perfectly still, didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't move at all, because movement meant breaking, and breaking meant losing control. And losing control meant dishonoring everything her father had taught her about being a warrior. Thor moved to her side, pressed against her leg, warm, solid, real. "I'm going to kill him," she said quietly, "not arrest him, not capture him, kill him." "No," Ghost said, "you're not." She turned, anger flaring. "He murdered my father, watched him die, and he's going to stand trial. He's going to face justice. He's going to spend the rest of his life in a maximum security prison knowing that everyone knows what he did." Ghost's voice was iron. "You kill him, you become him. Your father didn't raise you to be an assassin, Maddie, he raised you to be better." "Ghost is right," Davo said. "We do this the right way. The hard way. We gather evidence, expose the conspiracy, and let the system work." "The system?" Maddie's laugh was bitter. "The system that includes 2 serving major generals on Hawthorne's payroll? That system?" "No," Simone said. "The other system, the one that still works when enough people care enough to make it work." She pulled up another file on her laptop. "I've been in contact with someone while you were talking. A journalist, Rebecca Torres, from the ABC. Covered the war in Iraq. Exposed corruption in Canberra. She's made a career of holding the powerful accountable." "And you trust her?" "I trust that she hates corruption more than she loves her own safety. I've sent her encrypted copies of everything. If we succeed, she publishes the full story. If we fail," Simone's smile was grim, "she publishes anyway. Dead man's switch. Even if they kill all of us, the truth gets out." Ghost nodded slowly. "Insurance policy. Smart. But it also means we can't afford to fail quietly. If we go down loud. Then we don't go down." Maddie said, "What's the target?" Simone pulled up a satellite image. Port headland. Massive and complex. Thousands of containers and dozens of ships. She zoomed in on one vessel. A medium-sized cargo ship with a Liberian flag. Nothing distinguishing. The Pacific Star. Container ship scheduled to depart in 32 hours. Manifest shows mining equipment and automotive parts bound for Singapore. Reality shows. She pulled up hidden files. $40 million in cash. 3 crates are military-grade encrypted radios. 2 crates are drone control systems. And enough classified documents to compromise active operations in 7 countries. "That's not a shipment," Ghost said. "That's an exodus. They're liquidating." Liam's disappearance spooked them. "Agreed," Simone said. "They're moving everything they can before he can expose the operation. This is their last big score before they scatter and disappear." "How many hostiles?" Maddie asked. "Unknown, but if they're smart, and they are, they'll have significant security, private contractors, probably some of Vance's personal team." Simone highlighted another section of data. "And Major General Hawthorne will be there personally, overseeing the operation." The room went silent. "Rick's coming out of the shadows," Ghost said softly. "That's not like him. He's always been the man behind the curtain." "He's desperate," Davo said. "Desperate men make mistakes. Or desperate men burn everything down rather than get caught." Ghost studied the satellite image. His face thoughtful. "We need a plan, not just tactics. Strategy. We're going up against a professional security force with resources we can't match. We need to be smarter, faster, and willing to do things they won't expect." "Old school," Maddie said. "What?" "You said it yourself. Your generation ran operations that the current military has forgotten. No GPS, no drones, no satellite comms. Just maps and radios and people who knew how to move through enemy territory like smoke." She looked at Ghost, at Davo, at Simone. Teach me how you did it when you didn't have any advantages except skill and will." Ghost and Davo exchanged a glance. Some communication passed between them. Wordless, built on decades of shared experience. "You sure you want to learn?" Davo asked. "Because once you do, you can't unlearn it. And some of what we did back then, let's just say the rules were more flexible." "I'm sure." "All right, then." Ghost moved to the wall. Pulled down a map. Actual paper. Pre-internet. Marked with notes in faded ink. "This is Port Headland. Circa 1989. We ran a training operation here. Stopping mock weapon shipments. The basic layout hasn't changed much. For the next 6 hours. They planned." Ghost laid out infiltration routes learned during the Cold War. Approaches that avoided cameras because cameras didn't exist back then. Paths that relied on human psychology and security guard laziness rather than defeating electronic systems. Davo contributed weapons knowledge, discussing loadouts and tactics for close-quarters combat in confined spaces. Simone built an electronic warfare plan. Ways to jam communications and blind security systems without triggering alarms. And Maddie absorbed it all. Asking questions, challenging assumptions, synthesizing old wisdom with new capabilities. Your generation had to be smarter, she said during a brief break. No technology to fall back on, just training and experience. And fear, Davo added. Never forget the fear. We were terrified most of the time, but we learned to function through it. Let it sharpen us instead of breaking us. Dad never talked about being afraid. Your father was afraid every single day I knew him, Ghost said, but he was more afraid of letting his team down than he was of dying. That's what made him dangerous. He looked at her directly. You've got the same gift. I saw it in the desert when you moved to save Liam and Sophie. You were terrified, but you moved anyway. I didn't feel afraid. That's because you're your father's daughter. Fear doesn't paralyze you, it focuses you. He turned back to the map. Now, let's use that focus to plan something impossible. The plan that emerged was equal parts brilliant and insane. They would split into 3 elements. Ghost and Davo would establish overwatch positions with heavy weapons, Ghost's Barrett M82 and Davo's State Route 25 marksman rifle. Simone would run electronic warfare from a vehicle, jamming communications and creating digital chaos. And Maddie, with Thor, would infiltrate the ship itself, locate the evidence, and extract it before security could respond. You'll be alone in there, Ghost warned. No backup, no support. If it goes wrong, then it goes wrong alone, Maddie said. Better than getting everyone killed. There's one more thing, Simone said quietly. She pulled up a personnel file. A face on the screen. Military photo. 29 years old. Petty Officer Declan Rourke, currently assigned to Clearance Diving Team 4. Before that, AFP Special Investigator. Before that, Intelligence Analysis. I don't understand, Maddie said. He's undercover. Has been for 8 months. The AFP sent him into Vance's operation to gather evidence from the inside. Simone's smile was thin. I have a back-channel contact who confirmed it. Rourke is one of the good ones. If things go sideways, he's your insurance. Does Vance know? God, I hope not, because if he does, Rourke is already dead. They spent the next 12 hours in preparation. Weapons cleaned and loaded, gear checked and rechecked, routes memorized until they could navigate them blind. Contingency plans built on top of contingency plans. Liam stayed with Sophie, who'd become the mission's heart in ways none of them wanted to acknowledge. She represented everything they were fighting for: innocence, justice, the belief that some things were worth protecting, even when the cost was high. At one point, Maddie found her awake, staring at the ceiling, Thor lying beside her. Can't sleep? Maddie asked. I keep thinking about my mum. Sophie's voice was small. Daddy says she's in heaven, but I don't think he believes it. I think he just says it so I won't be sad. Maddie sat on the edge of the cot. What do you think? I think, Sophie's hand found Thor's fur. I think she's watching, making sure we're okay, and I think she'd want Daddy to be safe. He will be, I promise. You keep saying that, but what if you can't keep the promise? What if the bad men win? Out of the mouths of children came the questions adults were too afraid to ask. Then they win, Maddie said honestly, but we won't let that happen without a fight. And sometimes, fighting is all you can do. Even if you're scared, even if the odds are bad, you fight, because the alternative is giving up. And giving up means the bad men win forever. Sophie studied her face. Were you scared when you saved us? Terrified. But you saved us anyway. Yes. Then you're really brave. Sophie's small hand found Maddie's. My mum was brave, too. She found something bad and she tried to stop it. That's why the bad men hurt her. Your mum was very brave. And she'd be very proud of you. And of your daddy, especially of your daddy. He's protecting you the best way he knows how. Sophie nodded, satisfied with this answer. Her eyes drifted closed, hands still holding Maddie's, Thor warm against her side. Maddie waited until she was certain Sophie was asleep, then carefully extracted her hand and stood. She found Liam watching from across the cache, his face haunted. Thank you, he said quietly, for lying to her. I wasn't lying, she will be safe. You can't promise that. Yes, Maddie said, I can, because the alternative is unacceptable. 18 hours before the operation, Ghost gathered him for a final briefing. The map was spread across the table, marked with routes and positions and contingencies. This is going to be loud, he said. Once we engage, they'll know we're there. Speed and violence of action will be our advantages. Hit them before they can organize. Extract before they can coordinate a response. Rules of engagement? Davo asked. Anyone holding a weapon is a hostile. Anyone giving orders is a priority target. But we're not executioners. If they surrender, We take prisoners. Ghost's eyes found Maddie, and that includes Vance. You get the shot. You take him alive if possible. Understood? Understood. I mean it. Maddie, your father would want justice, not revenge. I know, and she did, but knowing what her father would want and being able to deliver it were two different things. They spent the final hours in silence. Warriors before a battle, each preparing in their own way. Davo Field stripped his weapons 3 times. Muscle memory and ritual combined. Simone ran final checks on her electronic warfare systems, typing code that would turn Port Headland's security infrastructure against itself. Ghost stood at the map, staring at it like he could divine the future from contour lines and shipping routes. And Maddie sat with Thor, forehead pressed against his, sharing breath and heartbeat and whatever passes for prayer between a soldier and her dog. Good boy, she whispered. Best boy, we're going hunting tonight, you and me, just like training, except this time, she swallowed hard. This time, I might not be able to bring you home. If things go bad, if I tell you to run, you find Sophie and you protect her. No matter what, understand? Thor's eyes held hers, brown and deep and carrying an intelligence that shouldn't fit in an animal's brain. He understood, maybe not the words, but the intent, the love, the terrible possibility of goodbye. She kissed his head, held him close for a moment that stretched too long and ended too soon. Okay, she said, standing, let's go to war. They loaded the vehicles in darkness. 2 trucks, Ghost and Davo in the F-250 with the heavy weapons. Maddie and Simone in a nondescript Toyota Hilux with Thor and enough electronics to start a small tech company. Liam stayed behind with Sophie, armed with a shotgun and instructions to call OOO and run if anyone found the cache. The drive to Port Headland took 3 hours. They arrived at 2,100 hours, parked in positions established during planning. Ghost and Davo moved to their Overwatch location, an abandoned warehouse with clear sightlines to the Pacific Star. Simone set up in the Hilux, her laptop glowing in the darkness, fingers already dancing across the keys. Maddie and Thor approached on foot. The port at night was a maze of light and shadow, thick with the smell of salt and diesel and red dust. Massive cranes towered overhead, their skeletal arms reaching into the darkness. Containers stacked like building blocks created artificial canyons. Paths that twisted and dead-ended and required constant spatial awareness. Security lights cast pools of illumination, leaving gaps of darkness between them. Maddie moved through those gaps like her father had taught her, like Ghost had reinforced during the briefing. Small and low and quiet. Thor ranged ahead, nose working, reading the night for threats human senses would miss. Her radio crackled softly. Overwatch in position. Ghost's voice. I count 15 hostiles visible. Probably twice that in reserve. You're cleared to approach. Copy. Moving to primary route. She ghosted through the shadows. Thor at her heel. The K9's training was flawless. No sound, no visible movement, just deadly potential compressed into fur and instinct. They reached the Pacific Star without incident. The ship rose above them, massive and dark, lit only by deck lights and the ambient glow of the port. A gangway extended from the dock to the deck. Exposed, visible, suicide. But Ghost and Davo had planned for this. Davo's voice on the radio. Simone, kill the dock lights on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. The lights died, not all at once. That would trigger alarms, but in a cascading pattern that looked like an electrical failure, plunging the gangway into darkness for 30 seconds. Maddie moved up the gangway, feet silent on the metal, Thor flowing beside her like liquid shadow. She reached the deck as the lights flickered back on. They were aboard. I'm on the ship, she whispered into the radio, moving to the cargo hold. Copy that. Be advised, you've got company topside. 4 guards, port and starboard positions. Thermal imaging shows 12 heat signatures in the main hold. 12 targets. Long odds. Acceptable odds for an SASR operator who'd trained for 6 years with the best K9 in the Australian Army. She moved through the ship's interior, navigating by mental map and Thor's nose. The cargo hold was forward. Down 2 decks, past crew quarters and engine spaces. Every corridor was a potential ambush. Every door a tactical nightmare. Thor alerted at a junction. Ears forward, body tense, guard ahead. Maddie peered around the corner. A single hostile, contractor gear, rifle held professionally, between her and the cargo hold. She couldn't shoot, suppressed SIG or not. The sound would alert others. Couldn't leave him, he'd spot her eventually. That left option 3. She gave Thor the attack command with a hand signal. Silent, immediate, the Malinois launched like a missile. 35 kilos of evolved predator hitting the guard's arm before he could react. His rifle clattered, He tried to scream. Maddie was already moving, covering the distance in heartbeats. A forearm across his throat cutting off air and sound. 30 seconds later, he was unconscious, zip-tied, gagged, not dead, not even badly hurt, just removed from the board. One hostile neutralized, she reported, continuing to objective. The cargo hold door was locked. An electronic keypad, 10,000 possible combinations, impossible to crack in the time available. Except Simone had been inside ORG's systems for 12 hours. Try 77,429. The lock clicked open. Beyond, the cargo hold opened like a cavern. Containers stacked floor to ceiling, creating a maze within a maze. And in the center, exactly as intelligence predicted, 4 men working around an open container. One of them turned at the sound of the door opening. Declan Vance. Even across 60 feet of bad light, Maddie recognized him from the video, from the file photo, from her nightmares for the last 3 nights. The man who had murdered her father. Their eyes met. Time stopped. The moment stretched, crystalline and sharp. Then Vance smiled. "Sergeant Brennan, I was hoping you'd come." And hell opened up. Vance's hand moved toward his radio. Maddie's SIG came up faster. The shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him away from the container. His radio clattered across the metal deck plating. The 3 other men in the hold dove for cover, weapons materializing from concealment. Thor was already moving, trained instinct overriding everything else. He hit the nearest hostile low and hard, jaws finding the man's forearm, dragging him down. The man screamed, his rifle firing wild rounds that sparked off steel containers. Maddie moved laterally, using containers for cover, engaging the second hostile. 2 rounds, center mass. He dropped. The third had gone to ground behind some crates, smart enough to stay hidden. Contact. Contact in the hold. Vance's voice, amplified by the metal space, carried through the ship. Ghost's voice on the radio, calm as death, acknowledged. You're about to have company. Estimate 2 minutes before reinforcements arrive. Complete your mission and extract. 2 minutes, 120 seconds. Might as well be an eternity. Maddie moved through the container maze, hunting the third hostile while Thor kept the first one pinned. The man was good. She heard nothing, saw nothing, just had to trust instinct and training. Thor's warning bark saved her life. She dove left as rounds chewed through the space where she'd been standing. She rolled, came up firing, and caught the hostile as he repositioned. 2 shots that ended his war. She recalled Thor with a whistle. The Malinois released his target, unconscious, bleeding, out of the fight, and returned to her side. 3 down, she reported. Vance wounded but mobile. Where is he? Simone's voice. Thermal imaging shows him moving toward the stern, trying to reach an exit. Not today, he's not. Maddie pursued, Thor ranging ahead, a blood trail on the deck. Vance's shoulder wound leaving breadcrumbs. She followed it through narrow passages, past crew quarters, the engine spaces echoing with machinery. She found him at a watertight door, struggling one-handed with the locking mechanism. Blood soaked his shirt. His face had gone pale, but his eyes remained sharp, calculating. Don't move, Maddie commanded, her SIG steady on his center mass. Vance turned slowly, hands visible, one arm hanging useless. Eagle eyes girl, I see it now. Same eyes, same stance, you even hold your weapon the same way. On your knees, hands behind your head. He was proud of you. You know, his last words. Vance's smile was ugly, dying in the Afghan mountains, bleeding out from a shot he never saw coming. And all he could think about was his daughter. I said on your knees. I watched the life leave his eyes. Took almost 2 minutes. He stayed conscious the whole time, trying to say your name. Vance's good hand drifted toward his belt. Want to know what else he said? Hands where I can see them. But his hand was already moving, coming up with a backup pistol. Small enough to hide, fast enough to matter. Maddie fired first, not center mass. Ghost's voice in her head, demanding justice, not revenge. The round took Vance in the right leg, dropping him hard. His pistol skidded across the deck. Thor pounced on it, jaws closing over the weapon, removing it from play. Vance lay bleeding from his shoulder and leg, his face twisted in pain and something else. Regret, maybe, or just rage at being caught. You should have killed me, he gasped. Your old man would have. My father was better than you, better than I'll ever be. That's why he's dead, and you're going to trial. Maddie zip-tied his hands behind his back. Rough but professional. SASR to a prison inmate. Hell of a career arc. Before she could key her radio, Ghost's voice crackled through, strained and urgent. Brennan, hold position. Hawthorne just emerged from the central cabin. He's making for a helicopter on the stern deck. Can you take the shot? Maddie asked, hauling Vance to his feet. Not without killing him. We need him alive. A pause, heavy with decision. I'm going in. Davo, you have Overwatch. Keep Maddie's exit route clear. Ghost, negative. That's not the plan. Plans change. Hawthorne doesn't walk away from this. Not after everything. Ghost's voice carried 40 years of betrayal compressed into a few words. Keep Vance secure. I'll handle Rick. The radio went silent. Maddie zip-tied Vance to a pipe. Made sure he wasn't going anywhere. Thor, guard. The Malinois took position, teeth bared at the prisoner. She moved toward the stern. Weapon up, following Ghost's last known trajectory. Ghost moved through the ship's superstructure like he was 30 years younger. Muscle memory overriding protesting joints. The Barrett was slung across his back. Too big for close quarters. His Sig Sauer P320 was out. A familiar weight, the same sidearm he'd carried through Timor and Iraq and a dozen conflicts that officially never happened. The helicopter deck was exposed. Rain had started falling, turning the non-skid surface treacherous. A Bell 407 sat with its rotors already spooling up. The turbine whined cutting through the storm. Major General Richard Hawthorne stood beside the aircraft in civilian clothes. An expensive suit soaked through. Grey hair plastered to his skull. He had one hand on the helicopter's door handle. Rick, Hawthorne turned. His face was 68 years old, weathered by decades of command and compromise. When he saw Ghost, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, regret, then it hardened into resolve. Jacko, I should have known you'd come yourself. Ghost kept his SIG trained center mass. Rain streaming down his face. Tell the pilot to shut it down. Rick, you're not leaving. Can't do that. Hawthorne's voice was calm, almost sad. Too much at stake. Too many people depending on me to disappear properly. People depending on you? Ghost's laugh was bitter. You mean the foreign agents buying Australian military secrets? Those people? I mean the operators we abandoned. Hawthorne took a step away from the helicopter. Do you remember what happened after Timor? Jacko, after Iraq? When those operations got declassified? We came home. We got nothing. The general's composure cracked. Classified missions stay classified, meaning we never officially existed. Our injuries, not service-related because the missions never happened. PTSD from operations that didn't occur. Can't get DVA coverage for that. We bled in the shadows. And they wanted us to stay there. Forgotten, expendable ghosts. Ghost took a step closer. His SIG never wavering. So you sold out, turned traitor. That's your answer. I reclaimed what they stole. Our dignity, our futures, our value. Hawthorne's hand moved a fraction toward his jacket. They made us disappear. Jacko, I just started charging them for the privilege. Don't move that hand. We both know I'll drop you before it clears your jacket. Hawthorne froze, rain running down his face like tears. You won't shoot me. 36 years of friendship. You were best man at my wedding. Godfather to my daughter. We ran patrols together in East Timor. We ran exfil under fire in Mogadishu. That has to count for something. Donovan Brennan was my friend. Too. Ghost's voice went as cold as the rain. A better friend than you turned out to be. You had him murdered. Declan Vance put a bullet in him. And you gave the order. Donovan was going to expose everything. Hawthorne's voice rose. Ruin years of operations. Destroy networks that took decades to build. He didn't understand what was at stake. He understood that treason is treason. That selling military technology to our enemies isn't reclaiming dignity. It's getting Australian soldiers killed. Ghost's jaw tightened. How many operations got compromised because you sold comms encryption? How many assets got burned because you traded their names for cash? How many of our people died so you could buy a bigger house? Hawthorne's face twisted. You think this is about money? About greed? This is about recognition. About finally getting what we earned. We fought their wars, ran their black ops, did things that would make Canberra vomit. And when it was over, they threw us away like used ammunition. So you became what we spent our lives fighting against. I became what I had to become to survive. Hawthorne's hand moved again, faster this time, going for the pistol Ghost knew would be there. Ghost fired once. The round took Hawthorne in the shoulder. A deliberate shot, disabling, not killing, chosen. The general went down hard, his pistol clattering from his hand across the wet deck. Ghost moved forward, kicked the weapon over the side, pressed his boot against Hawthorne's shoulder wound. The general screamed, his voice lost in the rain and the rotor wash. That's for Donovan, Ghost said quietly, leaning down so only Hawthorne could hear. This is for every man you betrayed. He zip-tied Hawthorne's hands behind his back with enough force to make the general gasp. Hauled him to his feet. The barrel of the SIG pressed against his spine. It didn't have to be like this. Hawthorne said, his voice weak with pain. We could have walked away. Jacko, both of us set for life. All you had to do was look the other way. Like you did in Timor. Like you did in Somalia. When did you become so righteous? When my best friend got murdered for doing the right thing, Ghost started dragging him toward the superstructure. When I realized that some betrayals are too big to ignore. When I understood that Donovan Brennan had more honor in his little finger than you and I combined. You're a hypocrite. You've killed more men than I ever sold out. I killed enemies of Australia. You created them. Ghost keyed his radio. Overwatch. I have Hawthorne. Moving to extraction point. Davo's voice crackled back. Copy that. Maddie's clear with her package. Rally point in 3 minutes. Roger. Ghost paused, looked at Hawthorne. Bleeding. Broken. The man who'd been his brother in arms for 36 years. You asked when I became righteous. I didn't. I just finally learned the difference between compromise and corruption. Donovan tried to teach you that. You killed him for it. Hawthorne's laugh was bitter. And now you'll be the hero. The old warrior who brought down the conspiracy. They'll probably give you a medal. I don't want a medal. I want you in prison for the rest of your life. Thinking every day about the men you betrayed. That's justice enough. He dragged the general through the ship. Meeting Maddie at the port deck. She had Vance zip-tied and gagged. Thor stood guard, ears alert. When she saw Hawthorne, something dark flickered in her eyes. Is he alive? Wounded? Coming with us? Ghost's voice was flat. 2 traitors, 1 justice system. Let's see if it still works. Footsteps echoed from forward. Reinforcements arriving. Multiple boots. Moving fast. Overwatch. I have Vance secured, but I'm about to be overrun. Need an exit strategy. Now. Maddie's voice carried strain. The first sign of pressure. Working on it. Davo and I are engaging targets topside. You've got a path to the portside deck. But it's going to be hot. Simone, can you give her cover? Already on it. Keyboards clacked. Rapid fire. Killing all internal ship lighting in 3, 2, 1. Darkness swallowed the ship. Emergency lights flickered on, dim and red, turning the passages into something from a nightmare. Maddie hauled Vance to his feet. The cig pressed against his spine. You're walking. Try anything and you'll be crawling. They moved through the crimson-lit corridors. Thor on point, Vance stumbling but complying. Behind them, confused shouts as reinforcements tried to navigate the suddenly hostile terrain. This is insane, Vance muttered. You're one woman with a dog. We have 30 operators on this ship. You're not getting out. Watch me. They emerged onto the port deck. The night air hit like cold water after the ship's enclosed spaces. Maddie oriented quickly. The gangway was AFT. Exposed. But Ghost had planned for this. 2. Overwatch. I need fire support. Danger close. Acknowledged. Get down. Maddie dropped, pulling Vance down with her. Thor went flat on command. Ghost's Barrett spoke from 600 meters away. The sound arrived before the impact. A crack like thunder splitting the world. One of the deck guards simply ceased to exist above the shoulders. Physics and high-velocity 50 caliber rounds writing their own brutal equation. Davo's State Route 25 followed. Disciplined 3-round bursts that dropped 2 more hostiles before they understood what was happening. Move now, Ghost commanded. Maddie ran, hauling Vance, Thor flowing beside them. Rounds chased them across the deck. Wildfire from panicked contractors who couldn't see their targets in the darkness and muzzle flash. She made the gangway, started down. Behind them, the ship erupted in chaos. Simone had done more than kill the lights. She'd triggered fire alarms, activated sprinkler systems, and locked watertight doors randomly throughout the vessel. 30 trained operators, reduced to confusion by one woman with a laptop and no conscience. They reached the dock. Maddie shoved Vance toward the rally point, kept her SIG trained on the ship. Thor watched their 6. Alert for threats. Overwatch. I'm clear. Say status. We're mobile. Davo's packing up. I'm providing cover fire for. Hold on. The Barrett roared 3 more times in quick succession. Contact eliminated. Hostiles are staying buttoned up on the ship. I think we convinced them that pursuing is bad for their health. Copy. Moving to extraction point Alpha. The Hilux materialized from the shadows. Simone at the wheel. Maddie threw Vance in the back. Thor jumped in beside him. Teeth bared in case the prisoner had any final stupid ideas. They were moving before the doors closed. Behind them, the Pacific Star sat quiet. Now bleeding personnel but still afloat. Still loaded with evidence of treason. We got what we came for? Ghost asked over the radio. Negative. Vance is secured, but the evidence is still on board. The container is being photographed as we speak. Simone's voice carried satisfaction. Sent a remote drone in while you were busy. 4K video of everything. Serial numbers, contents, documentation. Rebecca Torres is receiving the feed in real time. And thermal imaging showed one more person of interest. Davo added, heavy heat signature in the central cabin. Want to bet that's our Major General? We need him, Maddie said. Vance is one thing, but Hawthorne is the head. We cut it off or this whole thing grows back. Negative, Ghost said firmly. We have what we need. Evidence, a witness, video, documentation. Torres is already drafting the story. We push our luck further and someone dies. Probably us. He murdered my father. And he'll pay for it in court. In front of the world. That's better than putting a bullet in him and making him a martyr. Maddie wanted to argue, wanted to turn the Hilux around and finish what they'd started. But Ghost was right. He usually was, which made him insufferable and invaluable in equal measure. Fine, we extract, but if Hawthorne rabbits. He won't, Simone interrupted. I've been monitoring his communications. He's calling in favors, trying to activate political protection. But Rebecca Torres's article goes live in 6 hours. By morning, every news outlet in the country will be running the story. Hawthorne will be too busy lawyering up to run anywhere. They linked up with Ghost and Davo 5 kilometers from the port. Switched to the F-250. And left the Hilux to burn in an industrial lot. Covering tracks, eliminating evidence, doing all the things that Special Operations Forces had perfected over decades of shadow wars. The drive back to the cache took 4 hours. Nobody spoke much. Adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion and pain and the weight of what they'd done. Vance sat zip-tied in the truck bed, watched by Thor and Davo's rifle. He'd stopped talking an hour ago, finally understanding that his war was over. Dawn was breaking when they rolled up to the cache location. Liam met them at the hatch, Sophie peering around his legs. You're back, the little girl said, a simple statement carrying enormous relief. Told you, Maddie said, climbing down from the truck. Soldiers keep their promises. Sophie ran to her, wrapped small arms around Maddie's waist. For a moment, the sergeant allowed herself to be human instead of a warrior. Returned the hug, held this child who'd lost her mother and nearly lost her father and still somehow believed in promises. Thor nudged between them, demanding attention. Sophie laughed, buried her face in his fur. Good dog, she whispered, best soldier dog. They secured Vance in the cache, zip-tied to a support beam. Gagged for good measure, he glared daggers but couldn't do much else. Ghost called the AFP on the secure line, gave them coordinates and a brief summary. Federal agents would be there within 2 hours. What about Hawthorne? Liam asked. Let the system work, Ghost said. We've done our part, provided evidence, secured a witness, exposed the conspiracy. Now it's up to prosecutors and judges and juries. You trust the system? No, but I trust that enough people in the system still care about honor to make sure this one doesn't get buried. Simone's laptop chimed. She checked it, smiled for the first time since Maddie had met her. Torres's article just went live. Front page of the ABC's digital edition. Full documentation, video evidence, everything. Within an hour, it'll be trending on every platform. By tonight, it'll be the only story that matters. They gathered around her screen, reading the headline, DECADES long military conspiracy exposed, senior officers. Contractors sold secrets to enemies. The article was devastating. Names, dates, transactions, everything documented with the kind of thoroughness that made denial impossible. Major General Richard Hawthorne featured prominently. His photo from 30 years ago contrasted with recent images of him leaving the org headquarters. By noon, the AFP had raided ORG's offices. By evening, 27 people were in federal custody. By the following morning, 2 major generals had been relieved of duty pending investigation. The system, for once, was working. The AFP arrived precisely on schedule, led by a commander who looked like he'd spent too many years behind a desk and not enough in the field. He took custody of Vance with professional courtesy, read him his rights with bureaucratic precision. As they loaded Vance into their vehicle, he looked back at Maddie. This isn't over. You think you've won, but… Shut up, the AFP commander said mildly. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. Ghost stood with Maddie as they watched the vehicle depart, red dust rising in its wake. Your father would be proud, he said quietly. Would he? I didn't kill Vance, didn't even rough him up much. Just arrested him like a copper. Exactly. Your father understood something a lot of SASR blokes don't. That being willing to kill is easy. Being willing not to kill when you have every reason, that's hard. That's what makes you different from them. He gestured at the departing vehicle. Vance is a killer. You're a warrior. Know the difference. 3 days later, They gathered at the Australian War Memorial in Canberra. Warrant Officer Donovan Brennan's name had been on the Roll of Honour for 3 years. But now it was different. A new citation, an acknowledgement of classified service, of heroism in the shadows, of a sacrifice that finally could be spoken aloud. The Army had sent a full honour guard. The Chief of Army himself, a new appointment with a clean reputation, gave a speech about integrity and service and the debt owed to those who fought wars that couldn't be acknowledged. Maddie stood in her service dress uniform, Thor at her side wearing his K9 service vest with ribbons. Sophie held her hand, small fingers gripping tight. Liam stood behind them, one hand on his daughter's shoulder. Ghost, Davo, and Simone formed their own honour guard, old warriors paying respect to a fallen friend. When the speeches ended and the crowd dispersed, Maddie remained, kneeling before the wall where her father's name was inscribed. Thor beside her, Sophie on her other side. "Hey, Dad," she said quietly. "Took a while, but we got them, all of them. Hawthorne's awaiting trial. Vance is in the brig at Holsworthy. 27 others in custody. And Ghost says there will be more arrests before it's done." Sophie placed flowers at the base of the wall. White roses, her mother's favorite. "Mr. Brennan," the little girl said solemnly, "your daughter saved me and my daddy. She's a hero, like you, and Thor is the best soldier dog in the whole world. I thought you should know." Maddie's throat went tight. She stood, saluted the wall, sharp and professional, holding it for a full minute before dropping her hand. Ghost appeared at her elbow. Quiet as always. "Hawthorne's lawyer is floating a plea deal," he said. "Full cooperation in exchange for life instead of the death penalty. Treason doesn't carry the death penalty here." "No, but he doesn't know what else we have. Prosecutors want to get his testimony against the others. Roll up the whole network." "And Vance?" "No deals. Murder of a military officer. Treason. Conspiracy. He's going away forever. Federal supermax. Solitary confinement. He'll die old and alone and forgotten." Maddie nodded. It should have felt like victory. Maybe it did. It was hard to tell through the exhaustion and grief and relief. All tangled together. "What about you?" Ghost asked. "The Army's offering an early promotion. They want to make you the poster child for this. The young NCO who exposed corruption. Saved the day." "Pass. I'm not a poster. I'm AK-9 handler who got lucky and had good help." "Fair enough. What will you do?" She looked at Sophie, still standing before the wall, small and solemn and carrying a weight no 6-year-old should have to carry. "Take some leave. Spend time making sure Sophie's okay. Maybe teach her to shoot. Like Dad taught me, not because she'll need to fight, but because knowing you can makes everything else less scary. Your father would approve." Ghost's hand found her shoulder. "You did good, Maddie, better than good. You honored his memory the right way." She corrected, "We did good. I couldn't have done any of it without you. Without Davo and Simone. Without Liam and Sophie and Thor. It took all of us. That's what teams are for." He smiled, and for a moment, she saw the young SASR trooper who'd patrolled the jungles of East Timor. "Your father taught me that. Now you've reminded me. Thank you." They stood together in silence, watching as Sophie finished her goodbyes to a man she'd never met but who'd shaped her life anyway. Through his daughter's actions. 4 months later, Maddie sat in a military court as Declan Vance received his sentence. Life without parole, to be served at the Goulburn Supermax prison, where terrorists and traitors went to be forgotten. He didn't look at her as they led him away, didn't speak, just shuffled in his chains. A broken man who'd chosen wrong and paid for it with everything. Major General Hawthorne's trial was scheduled for the following year. His plea deal had fallen through when prosecutors decided they had enough evidence to convict without his cooperation. He'd spend his remaining years fighting the inevitable, burning through his money and reputation and friends. Ghost attended the sentencing with her, a silent presence that meant more than words. Afterward, they walked through Canberra, 2 warriors in civilian clothes, discussing things that didn't matter because the things that did were already settled. "Davo sends his regards," Ghost said. "He's back in Queensland, teaching his grandchildren to shoot. Says he's finally actually going fishing instead of just claiming to." "And Simone?" "Back in the private sector, though I suspect she's still monitoring things. Old habits die hard." "What about you?" Ghost stopped walking, looked at the Parliament House, gleaming in the afternoon sun. "I'm retiring, for real this time. Got a cabin up in the Daintree. A river nearby, nothing much to do except remember." "Sounds lonely." "Sounds perfect." He smiled. "But I'll visit, check in on you and Sophie. Make sure you're staying out of trouble." "I'm always in trouble." "I know, that's why I'll visit." They parted ways at the airport. Ghost heading north, Maddie south. She'd promised to pick up Sophie from school. The girl was living with Liam in Sydney now. An AFP job kept him close enough for her to check in regularly, but far enough for fresh starts. Thor waited in her ute, his tail wagging. When she opened the door, she scratched his ears, checked his water bowl, and started the engine. Her phone buzzed. A text from Liam. Sophie wants to know if you and Thor are still coming for dinner. She's making spaghetti. Fair warning, her cooking is terrible, but her enthusiasm makes up for it. Maddie smiled, typed back, "We'll be there. Tell her Thor loves terrible spaghetti." She drove through the Sydney traffic, Thor's head on her shoulder, thinking about promises kept and wars won and the price of honor in a world that often forgot what honor meant. Her father had paid that price with his life. She'd paid it with violence and fear and 3 days of not knowing if she'd survive to see Sophie's smile again. But they'd won. The good guys had actually won. It didn't happen often. It didn't happen enough. But today, this once, justice had prevailed over corruption, and truth over lies. That had to count for something. At Sophie's school, the little girl burst from the doors like a small blonde rocket. Her backpack bouncing, she spotted Maddie's ute and ran over, throwing her arms around Thor the moment he jumped down. "You came. I told Daddy you'd come. But he said you might be busy saving the world or something." "Nope, just saving dinner from your cooking." Sophie laughed, the sound bright and clean and unmarred by shadows. Whatever nightmares she'd carried were fading, replaced by the simple joys of being 7 years old and safe and loved. Liam appeared, slower, but smiling. "Hope you're hungry. Sophie's made enough spaghetti to feed a commando platoon." "Lucky for you, I brought my appetite." They drove to Liam's apartment. Small but comfortable, with pictures on the walls and toys scattered across the floor and all the signs of a life being rebuilt from ashes. Dinner was exactly as terrible as promised. Sophie's spaghetti was overcooked and under-seasoned, and she'd somehow managed to burn garlic bread in a microwave. But they ate every bite and praised her cooking, and Thor got fed meatballs under the table when nobody was supposedly looking. After dinner, Sophie insisted on showing Maddie her room. Posters of dogs covered the walls. Books about military working dogs were stacked on her desk, and on her nightstand, 2 photographs in matching frames. One showed her mother, smiling, alive, unaware that her future held only 18 more months. The other showed Maddie and Thor, taken the day after the operation, both of them exhausted, dirty, alive. "You're my hero," Sophie said simply. "You and Thor, you saved us, and you got the bad men who hurt my mum." Maddie knelt to Sophie's level, eye to eye, the way her father had done with her 1,000 times. "Your mum was the real hero, Sophie. She found something wrong and tried to fix it, even though it was dangerous. That took more courage than anything I did. Daddy says she'd be proud of me for being brave." "She would be, and she'd be proud of your daddy, too, for protecting you. We all just did what needed doing. That's not heroism, that's just being decent humans." "I think it's both." Sophie hugged her, fierce and tight. "Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for coming back." Later, driving home through the Sydney traffic, Thor asleep in the passenger seat, Maddie thought about promises and prices and the thin line between them. Her father had promised to serve with honor. That promise cost him everything. She'd promised to protect Sophie. That promise had nearly cost her the same. But both promises had been worth keeping, both prices worth paying, because in the end, what defined a warrior wasn't the weapons they carried or the enemies they killed. It was the promises they made and the lines they wouldn't cross and the people they protected, even when that protection came at a terrible cost. Her phone rang. It was Ghost. "Saw the news," he said without preamble. 2 more arrests. The government is going after the political appointees who tried to bury the investigation. This thing has legs." "Good. How's Sophie?" "She's 7 years old and making terrible spaghetti and having nightmares twice a week instead of every night." "So, better. Getting better. And you?" Maddie was quiet for a moment, checking in with herself, taking an honest inventory. "I'm okay, not great, but okay, and that's enough for now." "Your father used to say something," Ghost said, "after hard missions, when we'd lost people but won anyway. He'd say, the price of freedom is paid in small installments by ordinary people doing extraordinary things. We just made a payment. Now we rest until the next one comes due." "Sounds like him." "It should. He said it so often I memorized it." Ghost's voice softened. "Rest, Maddie, you've earned it. The next payment isn't due yet." "Roger that, old man. Take care of yourself." "You too, little hawk." He hung up. The nickname, her father's nickname for her, hit differently coming from Ghost. Like a torch being passed. A legacy acknowledged. A promise that even though Donovan Brennan was gone, the things he taught and believed and fought for lived on. Maddie drove through the night, Thor sleeping peacefully, the city lights blurring past. Tomorrow she'd return to duty. Next week she'd testify at another hearing. Next month, there'd be another mission, another crisis, another fight. But tonight, she was just a woman driving home with her dog, having kept a promise to a 6-year-old girl, having honored her father's memory the only way that mattered, with truth, with justice, with honor. And that was enough. The radio played softly, classic Aussie rock, her father's favorite, and somewhere in the Sydney darkness, Maddie Brennan smiled. Mission complete, Dad,